Ladies and gentlemen, so on the request of the organizer, I have the pleasure to open this session. So, the University Paris-Sorbonne Abu Dhabi is particularly proud to organize today, within the frame of the International Water Summit, the third workshop of our research initiative on the freshwater, its law and its tech in the Gulf Cooperation Council. Our presence at the International Water Summit shows how Sorbonne Abu Dhabi, with its network and its scientific expertise, is able to relevantly contribute to one of the most decisive debates for UAE and the Gulf countries region, namely water scarcity. Our contribution was possible thanks to the cooperation of our partners, Paris-Sorbonne Cité and its research lab, in particular the European Center of Business Law and Management, the Abu Dhabi Environmental Agency, the Abu Dhabi Regulation and Supervision Bureau, the Abu Dhabi Judicial Department, the Masdar Water Institute, the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, the French Council of State, the French Ministry of Environment, Espelia, the French law firm Physics, UBI France, the French Business Group, and the International Water Summit Conference organizer with Sarah Phillips and her team. Thank you. This contribution was imagined and is coordinated by our associate professor, Anthony Chamboredon, from our Law, Political Science, Economic and Management Department, in cooperation with the other Sorbonne Abu Dhabi department, in particular with the Department of Geography. This research initiative is moreover of the utmost interest for our own Sorbonne Abu Dhabi student in master degree, the Master in Law of Sustainable Development and the Master in Urban Planning, which are already planning to deepen their research in sustainable development law within the frame of a PhD program. Since the spring 2014, the institutional cooperation and collective research developed by our law department has been very fruitful, with the organization of already 2 workshops with many interventions of experts coming from a wide range of disciplines and cultures. The outcome of this collective research, which will provide a common legal framework of reference for the water governance in the Gulf region, will be published in June 2016. This final report will be submitted to the GCC authorities. This project launched by our university will not be fully successful without the support of the private sector. Sometimes business complain about the lack of connection between professional and academic sectors. Here is a great opportunity for private stakeholders committed to water management in the Gulf to take up supporting such a relevant project and working together hand in hand with academics. Even after 3 very busy days with many events here at the summit, you still will be impressed by the quality of the panel we have gathered for you and rewarded by the debate which will develop from our 2 roundtables. Thank you, and I let you, Anthony, to raise the stage.
Thank you very much, Eric, for your welcoming speech. Well, I'll be very brief because there are a lot of very interesting discussion to follow. Let me just give some other thanks. First of all, she's not here now, but she's just on the other room, Sarah Phillips again, for having accepted to host this third work session at the International Water Summit, and this is really, again, a great opportunity. Thank you again, Eric, for your support in this research project, which is not now lasting for more than a year. And I would like as well thank the management team of Paris-Sorbonne University, who did its best efforts to make it possible today. Our research program is actually an answer of the call launched by the academic staff last October 2013 by the board of Paris-Sorbonne Abu Dhabi. We have been asked to develop research initiatives fitting with the specific context of the Gulf region. For long, I wanted to work on the law of fresh water, and I thought it was an ideal topic to explore in Abu Dhabi. Moreover, I discovered that there was a strategic plan for water resources management that was recently published, and Abu Dhabi held for the second year an International Water Summit. I came last January, and I attended most of the program, and I was struck by the fact that among all the panel, the terminology, the term regulation was never really approached. And talk about many aspects, but we never really discussed about regulation, governance in water field and in sustainability. And I told that to my neighbor in the other room conference, and this neighbor was Simon Pearson, who's here today, and I would like to thank him very much, because thanks to him, actually, we're here today. We started a discussion, nice chat, and he said, well, you're absolutely right, this is something that should be really talked about, and why not proposing this topic for the next International Water Summit. We did it, and it worked quite well. So thank you again, Simon, to as well have been able to develop a cooperation with the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi, and I was very pleased to hear that your head, before yesterday, underlined this cooperation with Sorbonne University. Well, the objective of this research program is, first of all, and the main ambition is to provide a common legal framework for freshwater governance in the GCC. Well, it seems to be quite ambitious, of course, and you may say, well, this is really, really ambitious, but we can start, and this is what we decided, we can start by a case study with Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi appears to be quite emblematic of what's going on in the region of the Gulf, and it is exactly the topic we're going to discuss today. Today, our case study is Abu Dhabi water management, and you're going to have outstanding, and I'm underlining, I stress the words, outstanding experts who spend a lot of time to study the documents you've been kind to send to us, and who are going to give us their report of this first case study of Abu Dhabi. Of course, if this program goes on, we will enlarge the scope from Abu Dhabi to the other Emirates and to the other states of the Gulf Cooperation Council. The method we are going to choose, I'm a lawyer, I work in the law department, I'm interested in comparative law, in comparing the different legal cultures in the world, and the method we're going to use is a very pragmatic method. It's not going to be a systematic method, it's going to be very pragmatic and very eclectic. We will choose what we can get, and we will use what we can get without trying to be holistic or to be completely exhaustive. Actually, our call for contributions is very open in order to set a team with a great range of disciplines: law, political sciences, economics, management, geography, etc. We will be comparative and contextual in order to define what could be the most adaptable legal framework, common legal framework for the specificities of this region. Our meeting today is a work meeting and is going to reflect this methodology. We have academics from law and geography. We have a judge from the French Council of State. We have legal practitioners, experts in the water regulation, who are going to discuss on very different aspects of the regulation, water regulation in Abu Dhabi and in the UAE. But moreover, I would like to say that this session, these two sessions, these two round tables we organized, will be around Mr. Jacques Sirono, who is the head of the water legislation unit at the Environment Ministry, French Environment Ministry, and who is, I'm not shy to say it, the greatest legal experts in France regarding water governance. So I'm particularly glad as well to have two alumni, Majid Al-Kameri and Ahmed Al-Marzouki, from the first promotion of our master degree in Law of Sustainable Development, who have accepted to be the moderators of these two sessions in order to show you how this work, this research, has for intention, for goal, to be completely inserted in the society of the Emirates, and it is not just a pure and classical objective of academics. Thank you very much for your presence here, which counts a lot, and I wish you the best for this working session. Please, Majid, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure to be the moderator of the first roundtable today. And I would like to extend my thanks to Professor Eric Fouache, the Vice Chancellor of Paris-Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi, as well as Dr. Anthony Chabardon for giving me this opportunity. The first roundtable will elaborate on the following questions. The first speaker will be Dr. Jacques Sirono, who will talk about the French experience in the issue of water, police control, and financing. The second intervention will be by Laura Parmigiani, who will elaborate on how to secure scarce water in an oil-rich country. The third intervention will be by Dr. Rashid Ragala, who will elaborate on legal use in irrigation monitored by remote sensing and GIS techniques. The last one will be Dr. Piotr Shvedo, who will talk about the water trade as an alternative for Abu Dhabi. So please, I would like to invite you to
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. If you could send the slides, please. I have that, so fine. It's better. If I know how to use it. Fine. So, firstly, as you can see, French love frogs because we have this picture on the presentation of the French Ministry of Environment. And before talking about the French experience, we'll try and make a review of certain international experiences, and we'll review some global trends as related to water laws. If you consider a review of synthesis of a lot of more 100 water laws in the world of various countries. You will find the first trend, which is a trend to public ownership, with more and more considered as a common good or common patrimony, which is not free. It's not a free good. This common patrimony is managed into an integrated water resources management. We'll speak later about the content of this concept. It's IWRM in English. And this IWRM is managed within the frame of a river basin or groundwater body planning system. To that end, most of the competencies are brought together into in search for better coordination, generally in a single ministry. It's generally the Ministry of Ecology or Environment or Agriculture, which are more or less in charge of the water system. You will find more and more partnership with various categories of water users. At the same time, are implemented widespread water permits systems, accompanied sometimes, but it's not general, with by water taxes incentives systems. Including the raw water resources, to which is also applied the principle, the recovery of cost principle. Water, it means that water, even raw water, is not a free good, including for raw water either abstraction or discharges of pollution, including the cost of harm which is made to the aquatic environment. So thus it implies if you will not, there are a lot of slides. I didn't follow the rules because, as you know, when you have 6 lines, you have to prepare another one. But you will keep those documents, and here you have every kind of laws from France 1992 to Vietnam 2012, and we apply those principles to those laws from 1992. And so you will discover all those principles which are contained in the various laws from Mali, Algeria, Cambodia, Nicaragua, Ethiopia, and the latest ones, even Netherlands in 2009, Serbia and Vietnam, the latest one. So you will discover, if you add to that, so the same principle that we mentioned all around the various countries were those also of the 2000 Water Framework Directive, which includes most of them. If we consider now, after this review, this international reviewing, we will consider briefly the French system, its experience. But just before, we have to determine what has to contain a good water law, because it's very important to determine. One of the most important item is to have a legal status for the raw water resource, because most of countries are first focusing on the drinking water supply, the sewage, and so on. But the basic principle is firstly to determine to determine the legal status for the raw water in the nature. The second that you have to find in the law is, of course, the IWRM principles, a set of procedures, the permits, a planning system, because before issuing permits, you have to plan to make a program which will frame the permit system, and establish also a link of compliance between the planning and the planning system and the permit system, because the permit has to be in compliance with the plan. And also determine clear competencies related to wastewater treatment and drinking water supply. The main principle are those I presented a few minutes ago. Those are the principles for an optimum water law. So let's present shortly the French example. In 1964, France divided its territory into 6 main river basins, from the north to south and east to west. And we organized the system at the same time of the traditional administrative constituencies, circumscription, territorial circumscription. If you consider this quite simple organigram, you have on the left side you have the traditional administrative sector under the authority of the Ministry of Ecology, and with at the local level a representative of the central state with the prefect of a department in charge of issuing the permits. This is the traditional regional system. And at the same time, you have an economical and financial area or sector at the level of the basin. And this is always under the authority of the Ministry of Ecology. You have on each 6 basin a basin water agency, a basin committee, which is quite clear water parliament. And the basin water agency is not in charge of issuing any permit or so on. It's in charge of collecting taxes and according to the user pays principle, and to redistribute this amount of money to grant some necessary facilities in order to finance, for example, water sewage treatment plant, to help industrialists or municipalities to decrease its pollution or to increase its resource. And this, the second, the green, the green area is to support the traditional permits. If you get some subsidy to organize to decrease your pollution, you will be more able to respect your authorization, your license, and so on and so forth. So it's a well-balanced system between traditional issuing permit system, which is made according to the traditional division of the country, and the economical area, which is at the level of the basin, because no river can be managed without taking into account the natural constituency of the system, I mean the basin or the aquifer. And so this system is coordinated, and we have a coordination between the blue sector and the green sector. If you want some example, but the Professor Pujad will speak more in detail about the taxes and subsidies. We have a lot of taxes which are levied by the water agencies. So you have pollution taxes, both on household and non-household uses. Depending on the quantity and the toxicity of the pollution discharge, or on the quantity of the drinking water supply. If you are, for example, household, you have also taxes on water abstraction, according to the quantity of water use and the availability of the water abstractive. And of course, this system is quite it works since 1966, more or less, because the two years were necessary to enforce it. So this is the end of the first part of my intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jacques Cyrano. Can you please introduce yourself in a few words?
Yes. I'm working as the Ministry of Ecology, Sustainable Development, and Energy, which became a huge ministry since 2008. And I worked also for international organizations such as FAO or UNDP, and for punctual specific missions in order to prepare draft laws in several countries.
Thank you. Excellent. So the second person to speak is Laura Parmigiani, who will elaborate on how to secure scarce water in an oil-rich country.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk today. I am Laura Parmigiani, and I work as a researcher for the French Institute of International Relations. And my presentation will present some of the results of the research project that I'm doing in cooperation with the Sorbonne University and for the Institute, French Institute of International Relations, Institut Français des Relations Internationales. During my presentation, I'll always show you that despite the high costs of the water system in Abu Dhabi, especially in terms of desalinated water production, the well-developed economy of the emirate and the oil rent ensure a stable source of income that enables actually Abu Dhabi to pursue this production of high amounts of desalinated water. However, I will show you also that the current system has some limits, and not only economical, but also some more strategic and structural limits. Okay. Just for an introduction, as you can see, there is a strong connection among economic growth, water demand, and electricity consumption. I didn't show the energy is on the right axis of the graphic. I didn't show population because I couldn't, but I can tell you the number. And in the past 10 years, Abu Dhabi GDP has increased about 3 times. so 150% increase, while desalination water production increased by 50% and electricity by 100, so it doubled, and also the population of Abu Dhabi Emirates increased by 70%. So there's a strong relationship, a strong connection among all these factors: economic growth, water demand, electricity consumption, and population growth. But to be more specific, let's give a look at the water consumption. Maybe you already know these figures if you already listened to some of the conferences during these days. Based on the data of the Statistical Center of Abu Dhabi, the total water consumption was about 3,600 million cubic meters in 2012. Out of this big number, groundwater supplied the large majority. And this groundwater was mainly used by agriculture, actually only used by agriculture. And it was about 2,400 million cubic meters. Desalinated waters then covers mainly the residential, commercial, industrial sectors, while recycled water is mainly used for forests and landscaping irrigation. Now, a part of my research was to try to evaluate a little bit the cost of the water system. And looking at these figures, the first element I tried to assess was, what's the price of groundwater? And what's the price or the economic stakes of groundwater? And however, when I tried to look at the figures in groundwater, and I found out that groundwater is given for free. And also, if you look at the prices of electricity, so I looked at some operational costs, and I looked at the prices for electricity to pump water, and I found out that electricity for agriculture is subsidized, and for for an amount of about 580 million dirhams per year, more or less. And so despite this importance in the overall consumption, there is no price on groundwater. So I had to look and focus my research a little bit more on desalinated water. And however, I learned during this week that the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi is doing a study to try to determine the price of groundwater, which is very good news. But apparently it's quite difficult, but I think that this workshop will give ideas and inputs to this important study. So let's look at desalinated water. So as I said, desalinated and recycled wastewater are the other two sources of water in Abu Dhabi. They represent 29% and 4% of the overall consumption, roughly. And the cost of the sector, of the two sectors, when I showed electricity as well, we'll focus on water and wastewater, have been calculated, luckily, by the Regulation and Supervision Bureau last year. So there's an economic report that has been issued in December of last year. And RSB estimates that in 2013, the water turnover was around 9.8 billion dirhams, and it was for wastewater 2.3 billion dirhams. Now, these figures are quite important because of the difficulties of calculating costs in desalinated water. I just want to point out that for RSB talks about turnover, but it's the cost. I mean, it's the revenue that is necessary to recover production, transmission, and distribution costs. It's really the overall cost for the production of desalinated and wastewater. So I was saying that it's quite difficult, and I was glad that RSB did this work, because Abu Dhabi has these specific characteristic of having 93% of the desalinated water produced by cogeneration plants. So you produce water, but at the same time you produce electricity. So it's quite difficult to split the costs among electricity and water. So RSB did it. So we tried. So I take these figures, and production costs, maybe you cannot say, but they represent roughly half of the cost in production of desalination water, and the other half is the capacity charges. That means that desalinated plants receive a remuneration based on the availability and not on the actual production, not on the actual liters of water they produce, but on the availability. And these capacity charges are fixed, and they are nominal. That means that they are not revised based on inflation. There's a little part which is on actual production, but it's very little. So, which means that this 25 years contract is fixed, nominal. So probably the cost would be more if they were in real terms. And also, when they were calculated on the economic and financial parameters at that time, such as labor, for example, so the cost of having money to finance the project. So is this a lot? This is the question. Are these costs very high? Now, I couldn't compare these specificities of Abu Dhabi with other countries, so I tried to compare the tariffs. So these actual costs give a tariff, and the tariff is 10.43 dirhams per cubic meter of water. And I took Italy, because I'm sure that France will be given as an example. So I've taken the Italian case, which is a country which has some problems in the south with scarcity of water, but which also has a lot of resources in the north, especially on the mountains. And well, the cost of in Italy is 7.41 dirham for a cubic meter. Now, as I was saying, Italy has a lot of resources, so it doesn't have to produce desalinated water. So comparative, at current exchange rate, and you know that the euro is a little bit diminishing compared to the dirhams. Probably 6 months ago it was roughly 10 dirhams. So is it really expensive? Now, I try to calculate another important issue, which is subsidies, because not only groundwater is given for free, but also desalinated water has, until 31st December 2014, 80% given as a subsidy. So I roughly calculated that it's around 4 billion dirhams in subsidies in 2012, sorry. And if the budget of the government of Abu Dhabi was 52 billion dirhams, and I say if because I couldn't find the actual figure, so I couldn't find, so if someone knows it, I would be very glad to have it. So I calculated by other information. So it would be a 10%, more or less, the subsidies in water for the residential sector, for the desalination water would be 9% of the budget, so which is quite a bit. But let's give a look at the income of Abu Dhabi, since we're talking about budget. Well, you probably all know, but that UAE ranks 5th in proved oil reserves globally and 7th in the world for gas proved reserves. And it produces around 2.9 million barrels of oil per day. Now, 6 months ago, the barrel was $100. Today it's 50, but still, I think that makes a lot of money. And this money has been wisely managed since 1976 by the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. And having said that, I think still there are several problems, structural and also one more temporary, that asks for a change in the current system. First problem. While having one of the biggest proved reserves, the UAE and Abu Dhabi consume actually big quantities of gas. And the consumption is actually driven by the oil sector that uses the gas to enhance oil recovery. And then you see the electricity and water sector consumptions, which is the lower part of the graphic, the lower line. But some 10 billion cubic meters actually important from Qatar because now the production cannot sustain the consumption. And Qatar, for the moment, is the only supplier of gas, of alternative for Abu Dhabi. So the importance of diversifying importers is becoming a necessity. And one of the answers was creating an LNG terminal, liquefied natural gas, in Fujairah, so at the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, and which is quite important geopolitically, and to secure other gas supplies. Now, secure LNG, it's a good way of diversifying the imports, but it will be more costly. LNG is much more expensive than pipeline or national production, natural gas production. So this is an important element that will have, that has to be addressed. The second stake, which is, again, I think structural, is on environment and on geography. The high salinity of the Gulf and all of the aquifers, actually, has been pointed out in several conferences during this week, point to another problem, the location of the plants. Further desalination plants have to be located ideally on the Gulf of Oman because it's less, has less salinity, but there's no space to put them. ADWEC pointed this out in 2008, so there's no availability. Yes, I'm looking, thanks. So this is the second most important problem. How can we add capacity if we don't have space? And the last problem is more imminent because as of today, we're already lacking, as if ADWEC forecast is right, already 18 million per gallon per day of water. And there's only one addition that will be in maybe 2 years, but still, we are already lacking capacity for the current consumption. There's a capacity of 916, and it's predicted that it will be 934 in 2015. So I think that the answer that has been given by the Abu Dhabi Environment Vision and of the strategy that came out in November 2013 gives some of the answer, because it aims at diminishing the groundwater and desalination consumption by increasing the effective use of recycled water and also better manage the leakage. A target of 100% of recycled water consumed would reduce the pressure on groundwater resources and bring to zero, I don't know if you saw in the previous slide, but it would bring to zero the consumption of agricultural desalinated water. And also, it would, recycled water could be used in irrigation, landscaping, and also reducing physical losses would make available some more of desalination capacity. Now, to conclude, I would like to just add one, maybe a recommendation to the 2030 vision, which I think is very pragmatic. Cultural and social changes will be needed to achieve these targets and to overcome some of the difficulties that I showed. But I don't think they happen overnight, and it would take time for consumers to change their habits. But what can accelerate this process is certainly legislation, and the legislator has a powerful leverage to bring the water system into the right path. And I think this conference is all this is about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura Parmigiani, for your input. And now, Dr. Rashid Ragala, the floor is yours. And please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. I am Rashid Ragala, head of Department of Geography and Planning in Paris-Sorbonne University. My presentation is a part of project research managed by Department of Law and Economics in PSUAD, Paris-Sorbonne University, with the participation of the Department of Geography and Planning. the goal of this presentation is to participate to the decision making about planning of water, control of water. It's not mine? No? Yes. Okay. It's why we propose in the Department of Geography a rugged methodology with scientific procedure for automatic mapping from satellite images adapted to arid areas that can bring out the vegetation cover. It means to produce the map of vegetation cover. A temporal map every time. Every month we can create a map of vegetation because we can have 2 images by month with the satellite Landsat that I will present now. After experimentation of the region, on the region of Agadir in Morocco, this method is based on the combination of the image of visible and infrared radiation, gives very satisfactory result. I present the first experimentation. This is the map, automatic map of the vegetation in Abu Dhabi, green vegetation. And we want to experiment this application in the UAE with Landsat thematic mapper. It's a USA civilian satellite, and I hope to have high resolution with a GOA satellite to produce a precise map. This map is for 2000, and I experiment this method for the image of 2006. The red color here, all red color, you see, it's green vegetation. This is the town of Al Ain, and is the periphery of Al Ain. And we create automatically a map of the vegetation for 2006. These 2 maps confirm that the Al Ain region is not only an island of green countryside in the middle of the desert and dune area, but also Al Ain region is a strategic agricultural area in full extension, involved a large part in food security for Emirates. You see that the vegetation is concentrated in and around of Al Ain city, but also in the periphery, Al Ain, and in the periphery of Al Ain. But also in the periphery of the eastern part, in the other main roads, in the inter-dune corridor, of the fact that these interstices carry richer soil close to the water table and protected from the dune. Yeah. Only in the interstices of the dune and along the axis of transportation, road. It's a linear form in direction of Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi, here. I have some remarks. There is an expansion of irrigated area between 2000 and 2006, and therefore increasing consumption of water by agriculture. This increase in demand for irrigation water has been confirmed by the Environment Agency. You have two colors here. The clear green, it's for 2000, and the green dark is the vegetation, the extension, the new extension. And you see we have a lot of farm, new farm, between an expansion between 2000 and 2006. Now, the second step of this project is to provide geolocated assistance to ensure regular monitoring of illegal irrigation. Our approach is based on the following postulates. In the desert area, the permanent presence of the green vegetation is only possible if there is a water supply other than precipitation that are below threshold required for the practice of annual crops. In this case, if we observe the presence of green vegetation, then there is necessarily a use of irrigation. Is the postulate. My scientific approach is to realize regularly green vegetation map from satellite image to verify if the green vegetation plots are irrigated by authorized wells. Then it's necessary to combine the map of green vegetation surface with the map of irrigation canal, the map of officially declared well and their attributes, for example, the owner name, the capacity of the wells, and the declared area by the farmer. And we need also the cadastral map and its attributes. And we link green vegetation, the parcels of green vegetation, with those information. Finally, all green area that does not correspond to a known source of water supply will be selected, simply selected for field verification by the relevant authority. It's our project about illegal water. Now, we have another access to develop our project, is to use satellite image, the map of green vegetation, to produce regular information about the type of vegetation and to estimate the production of agriculture activity, to plan what we will need for the next year, imports or not imports. You know. And we work now about also the green area and in Abu Dhabi, in town. Because we observe that Abu Dhabi, it's a big town, but it's a big oasis also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. The fourth intervention will be by Dr. Piotr Shvedo, who will talk about the water trade as an alternative for Abu Dhabi. Please introduce yourself at the beginning.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Piotr Shvedo, and I teach international economic law at the Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland. I'd like to first thank the organizers for accepting my presentation, which is a part of my research project. Well, there's the main goal of this research project is to try to provide an answer whether is there a normative framework, a possible normative framework for a global or international water trade, which also is relevant for Abu Dhabi. Or you can produce your own water, or you can simply buy it from elsewhere. Well, there are many reasons, first of all, factual reasons why we have to face this problem. Well, as I'm a lawyer, I'm not that much involved. I take the facts as they are reports. I believe there is a growing deficit of water globally, taking it, for many reasons, because we need more and more water for agricultural production, for industry, for energy production, etc., etc. But moreover, for a lawyer, what is more important, what are the norms we can apply to that? And when you face that problem, you realize that the problem of water deficit and water management is a multi-normative problem. So you don't only have a law as such, but you also have religious norms and ethical norms. And they are applied cumulatively. Of course, law has been always somehow inspired by religion, by ethics, by philosophy, by morality. So therefore, if you want to approach this problem, you have to first take a look, what's the status of water in different religious normative systems, and then take a shorter look at ethical norms, and then you try to take a look, but through this perspective. Of course, the problem of water is present in Islam, and you know it better than me. And the status of water is somehow divine. Why? Because water is the source of life. Because when God created the world, he used water somehow. Okay? And you have the similar image in the Bible. In the Genesis, water is mentioned already in the second sentence of the Genesis. What are the conclusions of that? That water has a specific status. It's a distinct good, if you want to call it a good. In consequence, there should be a method of a communitarian use of water. And it's existing in Islam. There's a right to quench one's thirst, which could be compared into a modern human right to water. Okay? But on the other hand, in the Ottoman Majella Code, which was a 19th century codification of the positive law, but however, which was strongly influenced by Islamic ethics, there's this thought that water has an economic value and should be conserved. It may be privately owned, and on the other hand, the water in its natural state is an object of the public domain. Therefore, if an individual wants to have or needs to have access to greater quantity of water, in such a case, he or she should obtain or apply for a license. Also, the Romans had thought about this. I mentioned Seneca, great Roman thinker. There's a quote on benefits. I mentioned Seneca. I will not read this. I don't have time to do that. But the general conclusion from this quote is that his idea was that there are certain goods, and you should take also water into account, which are by natural law common. And you have this term, natural law, which we sometimes forget as modern lawyers, in the codifications of institutes by Justinian. For some things are by natural law common to all. Some are public, some belong to a society or corporation, and some belong to no one. But most things belong to individuals being acquired by various titles and will appear from what follows. Thus, the following things are by natural law common to all: the air, running water, the sea, and consequently the seashore. Well, if Romans used the term natural law, it was by this way they expressed that it's a thing or a status which does not require further justification. It's just the way it is. And we intuitively perceive it in the same way. Well, but if you look at modern comparative panorama of legal systems, you have the same intuition, but solutions are different. And if you look at the status of water under different legal systems, you see that all water is an object of property, or it's just an object of the right to use. Sometimes most of the water is publicly possessed, sometimes not. So sometimes it's very difficult if you want to have, if you're an international lawyer and you're looking for some general common legal ideas, you feel lost. There are different approaches. The interesting, if you want to have a more economic approach, you look at the phenomenon which was implemented in certain states like Australia, Chile, Western United States, also in Spain, of water banking. First, it was a kind of experiment, quite local. So the idea was that the bank buys water rights, property rights, right to use, whatever you call it, and then resells them when they are needed. And it worked quite well in certain regions. So with the time, it became an intrastate, and the states on which I mentioned are federal states, which is quite interesting, like the Emirates. And then also interstate water commerce or water trade entered in life. What for international lawyers somehow inspired as an example, if you ask yourself such a question. So the role of the banks were, first of all, to supervise the transactions or acquire the water rights and then resell them again in times of the drought. If you look again at the water status in the EU, the famous EU Water Framework Directive, you have this famous sentence that water is not a commercial product like any other, but at the same time, the same regulations encourages to take a more economic approach to water in order that it be conserved by the member states. Also in the United States, in the famous Voorhees versus Nebraska case, there's the sentence that water is an article of commerce, therefore it can be traded between the states and may be privately possessed. Okay? If it's an article of commerce, then the US Constitution applies, and the Supreme Court at the same time has a competence to deal with that. And now after 10 minutes, I start my main point, which is international law. Well, international law is slightly different than other legal systems. Why? Because there's no supreme power. International lawyers believe in certain principles, like the principle of sovereignty. It would take hours to explain what sovereignty is, but let's take it that the sovereignty is the very fundamental principle of international law that says that states as such are supreme powers and therefore states are equal. Okay? One may not impose the will upon another state. Okay? There's a principle of permanent sovereignty over natural resources. Okay? Each state governs its own natural resources. But at the same time, you have another principle, a Roman principle, pacta sunt servanda, that contracts must be fulfilled. if contracts must be fulfilled, if you enter as a state into an international agreement, which is, for example, an economic agreement, it should be followed simply. And we have such an agreement, but the question is, we don't know if it's applicable to water or how far it's applicable to water. I'm talking about the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the famous GATT, and its successor, the WTO. And under this agreement, which is applicable to different kinds of goods, we still don't know if it's applicable to water, and obviously you have certain states saying yes and certain states saying no. It depends on your interests, ideas, concepts, etc. The answer will be very, very, very important because if you agree that it's applicable, then Article 11 applies, and Article 11 says it's an article which prohibits the so-called quantitative restrictions. To make it short, if you put any good on the market, on your internal market, you should not create any trade barriers to export, okay? So if you have a water and you put it on your market and someone wants to buy it, you should not say, I'm sovereign, I will just produce it for myself, and I ban the export of it, okay? This is a fundamental idea of WTO, and you would agree with other goods, but we have certain problems with accepting it in relation to water. On the other hand, you have one exception, which is Article 20G, the right to apply measures relating to conservation of exhaustible natural resources, but there are certain conditions of applicability of this exception, which means that if you want to reduce the amount of goods on the market, if you want to reduce the export, you should also reduce the amount of goods on your internal market. So try to imagine that applicable to water. This is problematic. So you try to have to reduce production, energy production, consumption, etc. It's very, very, very difficult. That's why certain states, like Canada, simply say water in its natural state is out of WTO and also out of NAFTA. Canadians were hesitating for some time how to treat water in its natural state. There were some ideas like this idea which remained only on the map to trade water, to pump water down to the southern United States where you have a dry climate. But when NAFTA and WTO were negotiated, there was a huge discussion about that. And in order to calm down the temperature of discussion, they rather decided to make a political declaration that water in its natural state is not an economic good. It's another subject to be discussed. What's the legal status of a political declaration? It's not an international agreement, so what kind of legal effect it produces. So on the one hand, you have states like Canada. On the other hand, you have different examples. You have a nice image of Lesotho Highlands. Lesotho is in the mountains. It's surrounded by South Africa. One of the biggest water projects was constructed over there. Through tunnels and thanks to the system of dams, water is pumped down from Lesotho to the region of Johannesburg. In exchange, South Africa pays the so-called royalties. So if you look at the first stake, it seems to be a contract of sale. But if you look as a lawyer more into detail, it's not a contract of sale. It's difficult to find a good name. It's an exchange, okay? The South Africans are not saying we're not selling the water. We're just directing the water in an artificial way in other direction. And we are paying Lesotho for that through the system of royalties. You have a very complicated method of calculating those royalties. Another example is Singapore and Malaysia cooperation. You can see here an image. It's It's a bridge connecting Singapore, and along this bridge there's a pipeline pumping water. So, and again, there's water being pumped from Malaysia to Singapore. There's money paid to Malaysia, but if you look more into details, it's again not a contract of sale. It's a contract which was passed more than 50 years ago. It's a contract of lease. So Singapore is leasing land, and from that land, they are taking the water out and pumping it into Singapore. Okay? So it's not, technically speaking, a contract of sale. Oh, wrong button. Okay. One more example. It's a cooperation between Kyrgyzstan, which is in the mountains, and Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which are in the lowlands, in dry areas. Kyrgyzstan is having some water surpluses, so they constructed dams and using this water to produce energy, for heating, for example, in winter times. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is lacking water for that reason also. So with some tensions and some difficulties, they enter into a cooperation, and they let the Kyrgyzs, they let the water to flow down, and in exchange, they expect gas and coal, okay? So you could think it's a contract of sale, but it's more a contract of exchange in goods, okay? And there are moments, sometimes there are difficult moments, because each time when there's a new contract needed, there's a bargain, etc., etc. One of the states which is the most favorable to water trade is Turkey. There was even this idea of the famous Peace Pipeline water project to direct water through pipelines also to the area of the Gulf. For different economic and political reasons, it did not work out, but what remained is that Turkey is now in the last phase. There's a pipeline being constructed, a submarine pipeline, between Turkey and northern Cyprus. Okay? You could also discuss the legal status of northern Cyprus. I would not discuss it now, but anyway, northern Cyprus is not a part of Turkey, and if we agree with that, that's international cooperation. Okay? Turkey is in favor of doing it, and they put such an offer quite openly. Which also has to be taken into account is the technology that's been discussed for at least 10 years of the so-called water bags. I'm not an expert in it, I take it as it is, but what the experts say that this technology, which is a technology of plastic bags where you pump the potable water in it, which is less heavy than the salted water, and lets you to transport water with relatively small ships on long distances. So it was, there were some ideas of, for example, using it in the transport across Pacific from Canada, before the memorandum, from Canada to China. The Chinese were interested in buying the water from Canada. So this, I would say this technology is in the phase of tests. And if it would be economically feasible, you could have a global network of water trade. It would be not only regional, but also global. You could trade water from one end to the other end of the globe. What are the conclusions? Well, we have more questions than answers. We have legal lacunas. So we have to fill the legal lacunas with what we have. So all we have are some very general principles. I will be less ambitious. I would not try to provide a general answer if trade in water is feasible. I would rather try to be pluralistic and utilitarian. This means the goal is, we should look at the goal, what the goal is. The goal is to provide water when it's needed. If you want to sell it, why not? Okay? Of course, take into account other principles of international law, including the principle of sustainable development. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Piotr, for your input in this panel. Now it's time for questions. We will have 10 minutes of questions. Yes.
Shall I answer?
Yes.
Obviously, but the question is whether water at all is subjected to WTO. If you take this bottle, it's obviously an object of, it could be an object of international trade. It's not clear if water in a lake, some would say rather not. So the question is when it becomes a product. When it becomes a product. And you have millions of answers. Some say when it's somehow when there's a production process involved. So it's when it's already in a pipeline, when it's transported. So some would say it's a good because there was an involvement of production process. Okay? So anytime, and when you compare also the private lawyers have difficulties in dividing it. And we have, I didn't even realize it before I started this research project. There's a whole discussion under Polish civil law when water is becoming subordinated to private law. And when it's a good, or before that, when it's just an object of public law. It's, and obviously you have the preamble, and the preamble says, like a preamble, it calls to combine different goals, okay? But still, how to do that is pretty much unclear, okay? And then you have the preamble, and moreover you have certain exceptions like the one on conservation of natural resources. But what does it mean if we decide to trade water? There's no clear answer. Would be my answer, there's no answer. Sorry.
Any other question? Yes, please.
I have a question in the sense that we are also concerned not only on quantity but also quality of the water. And perhaps you could comment on if there are any mechanisms, policies or financial mechanisms available or regulations available to look at when different parties tend to pollute the same body of water. So, for example, I know in the US there's a system of trading pollution credits for certain basins of water. Maybe you've heard of such a mechanism, or you know of other experiences international about controlling pollution in certain common basin of water.
Well, I'm afraid you're asking me to summarize the whole international environmental law now. Of course, you have some certain general principles like the polluter pays, etc. You have the general rules of states' responsibility and liability. You have the customary rules, etc. on state responsibility. The great question is related, for example, to international rivers, and it's also related to state sovereignty. If you have an international river which crosses several states, what can you do with that river? Okay, can you pollute it? Can you pump it out? And again, you have plenty of answers. It's enough to take the Tigris and Euphrates example, and you have the Turkish answer, and you have the Iraqi and Syrian answer, which are completely the opposite. Why? Because they have conflicting interests. So, and obviously, when you have when you have huge differences in the interests, it's very difficult to reach an agreement on an agreement, okay? So, and this is one of the examples, water trade is also such kind of example that you have, and what makes international law distinct, if you don't have agreements, you have to look at the practice, because practice is an element of custom, and still in international law, custom is the source of law. So you observe the custom, and you see if it's accepted. If there is no objection from international community, you can take it as a norm.
Dr. Jack Cyrano, actually I have a question, if you allow me. According to Abu Dhabi Statistics Centers, the losses in water in UAE represent a volume of 20 to 30%. From a legal point of view, what can we do in order to reduce this percentage of losses in water?
So we'll try. We'll speak later in the second part of the presentation. You mean? Could you? Because I didn't clearly. Your question is to know whether in Abu Dhabi how to introduce the IWRM principle. Is that your question?
Yes.
Yes. We'll see. So later, but I think this principle is now a well-known principle, which is both to make a balance between the firstly the economical use and ecological use, and after that you have to make another balance at the same time between the various users, various categories of users who are industrialists and here in farming, because farming is in Abu Dhabi is 70% of the consumption, and then the households uses which are increasing. And so how to introduce this principle into your system? As you know, the knowledge I have about the Abu Dhabi system is very new. It's a new one. But I think the first step would be to introduce into a law, a general and water law, and to simple provisions which will define this principle.
Thank you so much. I really apologize for not being able to take the whole questions, as we have clear instructions not to exceed our time, and the time is over. So I will like to invite Ahmed Al-Marzouqi to start the second roundtable today. Thank you so much.